Well, good morning, everyone. Let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. Clerk, please take the roll.
Members, please make your selections on the tablets.
Yes.
Chair, we have a quorum with 8 members present and 7 members absent.
Thank you, Clerk. Let's begin with non-agenda public comment. This provides 2 minutes for anyone who would like to comment on something that is not on today's agenda, but is within the purview of MTS. Clerk, do we have any non-agenda public comment?
We do not.
Okay, we are going to move on to our consent items. We are going to have a recusal. We need 8 votes. And because of that, I'm going to pull item 7, which is the vote on which we'll have a recusal. We'll come back to that later in the agenda. Item 13 has also been removed from the agenda at staff's request. That will return at a later date. So the consent agenda at this point includes items 3 through 21 minus item number 7, which we'll come back to for a recusal, and item number 13, which will come back at a later date. Clerk, do we have any public comment on the consent items?
We do not.
I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve by Director Hall, and we have a second by Director McCann. Seeing no further discussion, Clerk, please take the roll.
Members, please make your selections on the tablets. The motion passes with 8 members voting yes and 7 members absent.
Thank you, Clerk. That brings us to item 22, which is the overview of the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program and revisions to Board Policy 26, the DBE program. Samantha Leslie is with us to provide the presentation.
Good morning. My name is Samantha Leslie, and I'll be presenting on the MTS DBE program and the proposed revisions to Board Policy 26. As a Federal Transit Administration grant recipient, MTS must comply with various DBE regulations. That includes developing a DBE program that outlines how we intend to comply and implement the DBE regulations, which is set forth at Board Policy 26. It requires us to conduct outreach measures to DBE, small business, and other certified firms to encourage participation from these firms and to better create a more level playing field to fairly and more better compete against the bigger firms and non-DBE firms. It requires us to establish a 3-year aspirational goal on how many federal dollars we anticipate awarding to DBE primes or DBE subs. And we have to monitor our achievement toward that triennial goal, both semi-annually and annually. Our DBE program requires us to outline our objectives of the DBE program. It requires us to designate a DBE liaison officer, who's the person responsible at the agency for ensuring compliance with the program, which is currently myself. It establishes what type of program we have. We have a race-neutral program here. What that means is we do not have any contract-specific DBE goals. We don't offer extra points if it's a DBE prime or bidder. Instead, the successful bidder is based on whoever provides the lowest bid or the best value, depending on the procurement. And we try to use our outreach measures to help increase the participation of and notice to DBEs. And so whenever a prime DBE ends up being the successful bidder, or whenever a prime subcontracts to a DBE, we can count that towards achievement of our DBE goal. We have to ensure certain contract provisions are in our third-party contracts. We have to monitor compliance, enforce as necessary, and again, conduct various outreach measures to encourage and achieve increased participation from DBEs and other certified firms. The DBE program requirements do say that it has to be a certified DBE in order for us to count achievement towards our DBE goal. The following are the eligibility requirements of a DBE firm. Caltrans currently oversees the certifications of DBEs here in the state, and there's various other public agencies as well through the state that offer this certification process. And additionally, in San Diego, there is resources and technical centers that help firms go through the certification process, which can be daunting for some. And so we really try to get the word out about the benefits, how to get through the process, what are the eligibility requirements through our contracts and website and through our various outreach measures. Here's a list of some of the DBE firms that we work with on our federally funded contracts. Many of these firms we've been working with for many, many years. They are great partners with us and are a huge asset in providing our operations and services. Another interesting note is many of these are prime contractors that are DBEs. Many of these don't actually subcontract out of the work. So 100% of these awards are going to the DBE prime. And we can also count 100% of the contract towards achievement of our DBE goal. Here is some examples of pictures of them providing these great services for our operations. One note is Carlos Guzman has grown with us here at MTS. They were not always a certified firm. They've helped the trolley department, especially with auto body repair whenever there's accidents. And they only recently became certified in the last 5 years and only recently became certified in support to the rail transportation. So companies are also growing with us, which is great. So although the FTA only allows us to count achievement toward our DBE goal through certified DBEs, they not only require us to outreach to DBEs, but to all the various certified firms. And so the list here are all those firms we're required to conduct outreach with, but we go above that and we are willing and open to outreaching to every certified firm there is. We want more competition. We find great partners with these firms. And we really try to highlight the benefits of getting these certifications through our various outreach measures. And here is a list of these non-DBE but certified firms that we work with. Again, many of these are prime contractors. And although we can't count these firms and whenever we award these firms contracts towards our DBE goal, we still record it, we still track it. And attachment A of the board policy includes some of the local funded contracts that go to these firms for your reference. So outreach measures, the goal here is how do we get the word out to as many of these firms about our program, what upcoming contract opportunities there are, and how to register, learn about it, and submit bids and proposals. And so we try to attend as many as we can, in-person or virtual outreach events that we can get an opportunity to meet vendors out in the field. This has been a great way to explain our program. We find that when we have these booths at events that many firms assume that we are only buying buses and trolleys and only services related to procurement of buses and trolleys, but that is not the case. We are buying all the different variety of services and goods as any other public agency or business would. So it really helps to get the word out that we do need their help and their services, and to really the best way to get notice about procurements that could be around the types of work that they provide is to register on an e-procurement website, which is currently Planet Bids. That is the best way to get automatic notice of what procurements are out there and that we're interested, and they can look and review the procurement. We're trying to get as many procurements that we can posted on the Planet Bids because we know there's that many more DBs and small businesses that would get notice of it and hopefully submit a bid. We really try to encourage these vendors to become certified. There's a lot of benefits to being on these databases, as many other public agencies and prime contractors are looking to these databases to identify subcontractors to work with. We try, even on a small procurement where you only might need 3 quotes, to try to look for at least one DBE or small business to request a quote from. Even assuming that we get all our procurements as we can, as many as we can, onto our e-procurement website, we know not every DBE is certified or registered on our Planet Bids website. So we're also giving direct notice to DBEs, going through the databases, seeing the work codes that match our procurement and giving them direct notice as well. And we recently adopted a small business set aside, which would mean if we find that there's a federally funded procurement that has at least 3 small businesses or 3 DBEs that perform in that area, that we would require that any bidder proposal be from a DBE or small business prime to ensure an increased DBE and small business achievement. And so we're looking forward to finding more procurements to establish that on. And then we generally just try to get the word about technical assistance. How can you grow your business? What grants might be available? What loans assistance might be available? How to get bonding? And so we have that all on our website and information in our contracts as well. We use our FTA funds on kind of specialized and unique types of procurements. And some of these do have limited number of DBEs that perform in this area. Examples are, elevator maintenance or fire alarm maintenance and repair, brake overhaul services for our trolleys, or bus engine overhaul services, rail welding, rail grinding. And so these are, can be unique areas that don't have as many DBEs, but we do find a lot of success in the preventative maintenance area. For example, for many years on our best value procurement, we've had a prime DBE firm win on these janitorial multi-year contracts, and that's been a great partner for us and a great success to meeting our DBE goal. I did want to note you do not see construction on here. We generally don't use the federal funds on our construction as often. That does seem to be changing. I know this in our next goal, we do have a few more, but that tends to be where you can see a little bit higher of DBE achievement. But at this time, mostly it is the following list that we're putting our federal funds on. We have to establish an overall triennial aspirational goal, and we adopted this recently in July of 2024. Our current goal is 5.6%. And how we established that was looking outward for the next 3 years, what types of federally funded contracts we anticipate awarding, how many federal dollars do we anticipate awarding on those contracts, and seeing what types of work or NICS codes relate to those procurements. From there, we just figure out in those areas how many DBEs versus non-DBEs provide those services in our geographic market area. Currently, where it is San Diego County. And from there, we can adjust that figure to reflect past achievement, how much we have been achieving in the past 5 or so years on our DBE goal, and come together with the base figure. And before adopting it, seeking an expansive amount of feedback and outreach towards the contracting community to get some thoughts on the goal and adopting it. And so it was 5.6%. And again, it's really based on the types of contracts we anticipate awarding is unfortunately just a limited number of DBEs that perform those areas. We monitor our achievement of a triennial goal on a semi-annual period, and we submit that to the FTA as well as to the board. We also monitor it on an annual period, and whenever we don't meet it on an annual period, we have to identify the reasons why and explain how we think we can improve in the future, and submit that as well to the FTA, and we provide a copy to the board. Here is a chart that shows the achievement of our DBE goal for the last triennial period. And as you can see, we did exceed it significantly, which was great. Also, though, you'll see that every semi-annual period does vary and fluctuate greatly. It really depends on what we were awarding that particular year. Is it a multi-year? Is it a large dollar value to a non-DBE? So it does fluctuate, but our aim and goal is really monitoring cumulatively, how are we doing meeting our triennial goal over the entire 3-year period. As you'll see here, the fiscal year 2023 was a great year for us in DBE achievement, and that was when we awarded a multi-year contract to NMS Management, our janitorial prime, for janitorial services. Upcoming, we're always looking to see how we can improve our outreach measures and increase DBE achievement, increase how firms know about MTS, and get that increased amount of DBEs and small business submitting bids and proposals. So we want to look and do more small business set-asides to see if that can be successful. We want to figure out strategies to better highlight the benefits of DBE and small business subcontractors working with us, particularly our large construction projects. On our project labor agreement, there are additional benefits if you are a DBE or small business sub. So how do we get the word out to them to really look to primes to team up so they can be successful and work on our contracts? And how do we get primes to better be encouraged and identify using DBEs and other certified subcontractors when there's subcontracting opportunities? And the other one, we are required to monitor prompt payments, so making sure the prime is paying their subcontractors promptly. And we've always had a pretty manual administrative process to monitor that. And we just implemented a new workflow through our enterprise resource management system, SAP, to more promptly review this area. So we're looking forward to implementing that this year. Lastly, we have some minor clarifications to revise board policy 26. One relates to prompt payment. Now that we're kind of changing the workflow of how we're monitoring that, we're just making clarifications in the program to show how we're going to be reviewing compliance in this area. And then secondly, as mentioned earlier, we are required to conduct outreach to various DBE and small business firms, but our program didn't expressly state that. It has been our practice. And so the proposed revisions just expressly state that we will comply with this outreach and encourage, when possible and practical, participation from all the various non-DBE firms. And with that, it is our recommendation to have the board approve the proposed revisions of board policy 26. And I'm available to answer any questions the board may have. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not.
Okay, we will open board discussion on this item and we will entertain a motion. We will begin with Director Foster.
Yes, thank you for the presentation and the quick overview of the DBE program. Just looking at the different types of services, you mentioned that typically you don't use the dollars for construction. It sounds like you're moving to where that will now be applicable. Can you just shed some light as to why that decision, or how you guys make that determination, how you guys apply these funds, or what you use them for in regards to your procurement process?
I think that's more of a financial decision that we make based on, federal dollars are reimbursable dollars. So you want to spend, judiciously when you want. And then there's also federal requirements that come with those dollars. So it really just depends a lot on a decision on how we want to fund those construction type projects. Like for instance, if we get a federal grant, obviously it's federalized project. So we would be looking at that for federal. Does anybody from finance want to add to that? It's a color of money type of thing sometimes that causes us not to use federal dollars.
Yeah, Sharon pretty much mentioned it. We use it primarily for preventative maintenance. It allows for the drawing of the federal dollars to happen in a much quicker state. And so we've done that in the past. But like Sharon mentioned, if there are specific grants, federal grants, we will apply those to capital projects where necessary.
So the concern is cash flow?
It's cash flow, but it just allows us to draw those funds down quicker. So we do use those primarily.
So it's cash flow?
Yes.
Right. And then in regards to as you say, there are certain provisions or requirements that come along with the dollars. Am I hearing, to rephrase it, administrative burden that is a concern?
No, for instance, if you have federal dollars in a project, you might have to do NEPA as well as CEQA, or things like that. And there's got to be other.
Yeah, for construction by America, it is really complicated. And so if you have a construction project where you don't have to worry about compliance with Buy America.
So it's the administrative,
yeah.
I'm saying it differently, but I'm just trying to cut to the reality, what I think is a practical reality, which it sounds like it's the administrative burden, whether it's on the agency or the contractor.
Oh, it's also cost. So if you have to comply with Buy America, you may have a more costly project. It just depends on what kind of things are involved with the construction project. So it's not just administrative, it's cost, it's when you can use your dollars, et cetera.
Sometimes, again, it depends on the project, but sometimes with Buy America, you actually have to redesign the project because you can't find a Buy America compliant piece of equipment that fits within the footprint that you designed it. And so that's administrative, but it's also just, it changes the project, like the nature of what you're building.
I understand. And then just as I look at the dollar values, as you look at the from year to year, it just seems like the dollar values are low as far as the grant award. So if you say for 2020, if I understand the chart, it says, if I can get it in front of me, bear with me. So for example, FY 2022, total federal award was 7.8. Looks like your high point was 23, 17.8. In 24, you had 3.6. So I guess my question is, how are you guys pursuing the dollars with the appropriate agencies? Because it just seems like the dollar values are low.
I think Larry can probably answer that already, but I think that that's when he says we use most of our federal dollars for preventive maintenance, that means we're paying for our own staff time. So most of that money, like from the federal government, like it's not necessarily meaning that we got less federal dollars those years. It's how they got allocated in our budget. And if they're paying for our mechanic employees and things like that time, it doesn't go into this DBE calculation because it's not being used on outside services.
Okay, so you're getting an overall award to take care of your internal cost, which is a majority of where the dollars are spent. And then what I'm seeing is, if I understand what you have indicated, is that the dollar values in regards to award goes back to the answer to your first question, how you make those financial decisions on what you make available in regards to your outsourcing. Does that make
Yes,
sense?
I'm looking
Did
at
I
our
say that
CFO to make sure that the
correctly?
lawyer explained it properly. Yeah.
Yes, I think that's what,
Sounds right?
yeah.
Sounds like I got it? Okay. Okay, it just seems like there should be more opportunity to, as we talk about this in the opportunities, that it seems like there should be more dollars made available to the contractors that are certified. The other question I have is, you brought up your race and gender neutral efforts. Part of that is all of the outreach. Can you elaborate more on the outreach that you do? You mentioned your website and certain things that you make available on the website, but can you cover any type of true workshops that you may do? When we talk about technical assistance, it was touched upon if you do anything that's truly in-house as far as how the agency does work. I'll give you an example. At the city, depending on the size of the contract or the type of work, and I'm gonna go to construction where you may have to do a cost loaded schedule, and understanding all the different nuances, how you do your pay applications, how that process works internally. Do you guys cover any of those types of workshops or types of things to help folks who may be new to MTS understand just how the procurement process works, how the contract management process works, how getting deliverables in on a timely manner, and what that looks like?
Yes, we actually. Yes, we do it's not as frequently as I'd like, but we do host our own DBE and small business outreach event. Several years ago, we did a virtual all-day outreach event where we talked about MTS. We talked about how do you work with MTS, what to expect on a procurement. We explained what types of contracting opportunities may be available. How do you learn about us? Who do you talk to? And so we do want to do that again. It's been a while. Our procurement department also helps me do these outreach events. It's not just one person in procurement. They're always, when they're looking at procurements, is how can I better achieve and get word out to these vendors about my procurements. But we can definitely try to prioritize another outreach event. I do think it is helpful because it's daunting. A public agency procurement packet can be a lot of forms. You don't want them to miss a form and then be found not responsive. And so how do we better encourage them to not be so daunting of a process? So I agree with you. It was a great outreach event that we did when we hosted it. We also had other public agencies at the outreach event to explain their DBE programs. And so we can definitely look to do that again soon.
Okay, so appreciate that. So I'm hearing you don't do workshops per se to cover
Not currently, but we also, we do have pre-bid meetings that are optional a lot of the times. We don't want to require it just to, again, reduce the amount of bidders, but in those, we also explain step-by-step how the procurement process works, what things to not miss, what tips to be successful. But we we can definitely highlight and do that more often because it was a great event.
Okay. So let me ask you this in regards to when you are in a situation where it's not a prime contractor, where you made a contract award, they have subcontracts that are certified firms, DBEs. How do you handle, walk me through your process on how you handle substitutions if someone were to say, hey, I want to substitute a DBE contractor?
So in the FTA regulations, there are a lot of restrictions when you have a contract specific goal related to DBEs and you try to substitute them out during the contract. We have a race neutral program, but nonetheless, we still require that the prime work with the staff, the project manager, to confirm whether substitution is approved. They do, if it's a public works, I know there's various requirements too before you can substitute out a sub. But we do ensure that staff is aware of it and that they meet the requirements of the contract and the business needs of us before they can substitute out. If we don't have that many DBE subs, but historically when it does happen, that's a DBE sub is substituted, they also reach out to me, but it doesn't happen very often. We really do have majority of the time a DBE prime.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, what I think I'm hearing is, and I appreciate the Code of Federal Regulations and also appreciate Public Contract Code. What I'm hearing is if you guys have a subcontractor scenario, let me ask it this way, is it the policy of MTS to enforce like for like? Meaning, if I'm a prime, I have a subcontractor that I've said I was going to use. I think you guys would require folks to list any subcontractors, right? That if there's a DBE subcontractor in which you are anticipating participation from, that subcontractor is looking to be substituted, whether it's construction of goods or services, whatever it is, that you guys enforce the substitution to be like for like, meaning that if they are going to remove a DBE, that you require replacement with a DBE, unless there's necessary justification on not being able to find another, there's no availability, I'll say.
It currently is not a requirement in our documents or our policy that it has to be a DBE substitution with a different DBE sub at this time. But we could review that idea. It's not a requirement, but we can look for that in our program and evaluate it.
Okay. I think my last question would be, because it looks like your scope of work is pretty consistent in how you do apply the federal dollars and the contracts that you pursue. Can you send over to my office just a list of the DBEs that are in your pool that you tend to communicate with?
Yes.
Pretty much on an ongoing basis from what I saw. Seems pretty standard across several agencies. The names that I saw, right? Aguirre. I think I saw some things with, did I see Nino Moore on another slide or something?
Yes, they were MBE or WBE, I believe.
Yeah,
Yes.
so, okay. All righty. And then you brought up federal dollars, but how many dollars, I saw you mention EPA in the contract. How many dollars what do we typically get from the EPA?
I think this is a current grant that we're looking to try to be successful on. I don't know I think we're in the process of it and it's new. And that's where it prompted this discussion of our board policy was silent on how we do outreach to variety firms. And so I wanted to ensure if we do get successful that we are in compliance with that grant requirement ahead of time. But I think we're in the process of applying for a potential EPA grant.
Okay. The last thing, it looked like you guys do use these dollars for equipment purchases. Is that accurate or no?
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, for example, B&B Diversified Materials, I believe we buy rail, certain wood rail. I don't know the technical term, but some kind of rail that, or ties, maybe it's rail ties from them. So it's not as often we're going to see a DBE prime provide or as like a distributor of goods, but it does happen. Air and lube systems and B&B are examples of those.
Okay. All righty. Okay. Well, I think for now you've answered my questions. I guess my concern is for the dollars that we are seeing that are being made available, and with the current federal environment, are you guys anticipating any issues with continuing to receive dollars for these various items? And then if so, with the budget conversations, how are we anticipating?
Well, we're going to have an item on budget later in the agenda, but yeah, I mean, everybody's guess is as good as mine.
Okay.
We so far have been able to draw down dollars federally.
Okay. All righty. Thank you. I will move staff's recommendation regarding the item. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Foster. Let's go to Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Stepp.
Thank you so much, Chair Whitburn. I thank you, Samantha, for presenting this item. I know we've been kind of working on this for a few years together. So I just want to acknowledge some of the changes, right? The expanded certifications for the socially disadvantaged businesses and board policy, and also the strengthened language around the compliance for prime contractors and payments to subs. Super, super important in this space. I grew up remembering my father waiting 90 to 120 days to be paid by prime contractors, and it really having a big impact on the business. So I do appreciate that. I wanted to ask an additional question about outreach, and you may have covered it, but I wanted to know when you do have the outreach events, what you're using the Planet Bids registration. Are there any other things that you use as far as invitations to these outreach events to ensure that folks know what's going on?
Oh, it keeps going. Whenever we do get invited to these events, we always try to participate. So not just being like a member, just going around. We try to have a booth at these events, and we really try to.
So are these are events that we as MTS do not organize? These
Right.
are okay.
Generally,
right.
These are hosted by Sandag or Caltrans or San Diego Airport, and we actually are also part of a public agency consortium of various public agencies within the county. And we meet every 1 to 2 months and we talk about these events. How can we help each other on these events? What can we contribute to the event? How can we make it successful? Best practices. Do you have this problem at your agency? Have you tried this strategy? And so we are working together on these outreach events to make it as successful as possible and get as many public agencies there so we can talk to as many vendors and get the word out about how important it is we all work together in the community related to the DBE program, the small business program.
Do we have any data on how successful these outreach events are for people that we engage in at the events that actually are able to become a part of our system?
We can track after an event, who we talked to and compare, did they register on Planet Bids in the next couple of days or a week later?
Mm-hmm.
And we can track that. We don't consistently look at that because it's hard to say how often do you look at it. But we can look at that. We can have that data.
And I think, outreach is always important, no matter what we're talking about. I do think that doing business with MTS it can be very complex. And so the technical assistance, the workshops, those types of things, I think may produce a better outcome because of how tough it is to do business, at this level where people may be ready, but may not know all of the information that they need to know. Those may give us more kind of bang for our buck because the outreach events are, I think, becoming more and more of a to-do list type of checklist exercise, whereas we are engaging with smaller businesses the important aspect of that is technical assistance and helping folks build capacity. So I'll just put that out there for now. I think it's very important for the reasons that I've stated, but I will leave my comments there. I will second the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Pro Tem. We have a motion from Director Foster, a second from Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Stepp, and we'll go to Director Hall.
Real quick, the eligibility requirements, slide 4. How did we come up with those? How did they come up with those? Who does?
Transit.
Okay.
Department of Transit establishes the dollar values do change. I'm not sure every year, but ever so often based on CPI. And then the other thing is the decision to be a small business. It depends on the type of business it is. So the dollar value may be a little bit different for like the gross receipts, for example, but that is all established by the DOT.
Well, the dollar amount for majority owner, $2 million in San Diego could be a house at that point. So I was just wondering how we did that. Whereas 30 million actually sounds a little high to me.
The net worth actually excludes the value of your primary residence. So
Okay.
they thought about that one.
Okay.
But yeah.
Oh, that's good. So, and the 30 million, Karen, same thing?
Yeah, I think this is all set by the Small Business Administration. So, I don't know, I haven't really followed how they set those numbers, but that's something that federal agency
Yeah,
establishes.
in Kansas or Louisiana, it could be different than, obviously here. So, or West Virginia, which is the one we're dealing with now. Okay. And then how do we, on verification? I have run across experiences where it's been a woman-owned business and they just put somebody in that name as a woman-owned business. What do you do to verify?
Yeah, so as I mentioned on the semi-annual report, before I finalize my report, I go through every single DBE firm that I'm aware of and go to the Caltrans database and confirm not only that they're still current and active as a DBE, but I also look at their NICS code, their works code, because you might be a small business in one type of area, but not the other. So I verify whether or not the NICS code matches the type of contract that they're working with MTS. And until I see that, am I allowed to count them towards DBE achievement? And then I also have to monitor to ensure they're actually the firm performing the work on our site. And so with those two things, I have to do that before I'm allowed to count
And that's
it.
my concern. They could have two companies and one could be a multi-million-dollar company and the other one could be a disadvantaged company. Now, do you check for those kind of things or not?
I just check to see if they're a current certified DBE firm and through
And
those.
it's all on Caltrans is doing that?
Yeah, Caltrans. There's other certifying agencies in the state, like LA Metro has a program as well, but the database is all managed by Caltrans.
So I guess I get back to my original question. You could say that you're this business, but the reality is you're this other business that's pretending to be this business. That's what I'm concerned about. But it doesn't sound like we verify ourselves is what it sounds like. We don't go out and say, show me your tax forms. Show me. Go ahead.
Oh, no, we don't, but Caltrans does. They have a pretty, I heard, and it can be intimidating process of a lot of tax documents, a lot of proof that the majority owner is actually the one directing business, is doing and working day to day in the business. And so Caltrans is the responsible entity to ensure that they meet these minimum requirements.
Well, I think we should do a little bit of our own verification. So that's just my personal opinion.
Okay, thank you, Director Hall. Seeing no further discussion, we have a motion by Director Foster and we have a second by Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Stepp. Clerk, please call the vote.
Members, please make your selections on the tablets. The motion passes with 13 members voting yes, 1 member voting no, and 2 members absent.
Thank you, Clerk. All right, we're going to return to consent item 7 since Director Leyva Gonzalez needs to recuse. Director Leyva Gonzalez, if you would state the reason for your recusal and you could step out of the room.
There's a conflict for my day responsibilities pertaining to the PLA that's implemented in that we have the San Diego Building and Construction Trades Council with MTS.
Okay, thank you.
Line item.
Thank you. We'll allow you to step out of the room. I pulled item 7 off the consent agenda so that we would have a quorum once Director Leyva Gonzalez steps out. And now we do have a quorum. Clerk, since we pulled the item, do we have any public comment on item 7?
We do not.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion to approve item number 7.
I will move item number 7.
Okay.
The recommendation.
All right. We have a motion.
I'll second it.
And a second. It was moved by Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Stepp, seconded by Director Hall. Seeing no further director comment, clerk, please call the roll.
Members, please make your selections on the tablets. The motion passes with 11 members voting yes, 1 member voting no, 1 member recusing themselves, and 2 members absent.
Okay, thank you, clerk. That brings us to item number 23, which is the annual safety performance review and approval of updated agency safety plan. And we're going to invite Fabian Soberg and Jared Garcia to provide the presentation. Please feel free to begin whenever you're ready.
Good morning. My name is Fabian Soberg, and I'm the System Safety Manager, RAL. And I'm here along with Jared Garcia, who's the Manager of Safety for BUS. And today we are here to present our annual safety review and then also present on the updates made to our PTAS for BUS and RAL. So just a little background on our PTAS. It is a FTA requirement that recipients receiving financial assistance implement a PTAS. And that rule came out back in July of 2019. And then we implemented our PTAS back in 2020, which was reviewed and approved by the board members. Currently, we have updates with the Rule 49 CFR Part 673. And with those updates, we included that into our PTAS. In the REL PTAS Revision 3, the following items were included into that plan. One was the MTS Joint Safety Committee Plan, which outlines the rules and guidelines established by the Joint Safety Committee, as well as the Transit Worker Risk Reduction Program, and then additional safety performance measures, which are going to be based on a 3-year rolling average of the National Transit Database data. Now, recipients are also required to report the safety performance measures to the boards annually. And as you can see, we have the list of the new safety performance measures, and then we also have the previous ones up there as well, which I will go over in just one moment. I do want to note that the new safety performance measures won't be reported on until we have a 3-year rolling average. A 3-year rolling average to establish a baseline and to compare to the previous 3-year rolling average. So our first safety performance measure item is major events. So major events consist of collisions, injuries, fatalities, and then any property damage that is more than $25,000. Or $25,000. So as you can see, the established baseline year range was 2017 through 2019, and our 3-year average at that time was 4.65. And we have continuously seen a reduction in major events on our system. Next is fatalities. Our 3-year average baseline was 0.12. We saw a reduction until we got to 2019 through 2022. We stayed the same at 0.08. And then we did see an increase in the average with 0.11 for 2021 through 2023, and then 0.12 between 2022 to 2024. So the contributing factor to that increase in the average is back in 2023, we did experience 7 fatalities on our system. 4 of those fatalities were deemed suicide by the medical examiner, and then the other 3 were deemed unpreventable by our accident review committee. Now, we did see a decrease in fatalities in 2024, where we had 4, and 3 of those were deemed suicide by the medical examiner, and 1 was deemed unpreventable by the accident review committee. We have seen an increase in suicides on our system. So one of the safety PIP goals for FY26 is to implement signage from the suicide prevention hotline to all our schedule boards that are located in our stations, and then also increase that signage along our right of way as well. The hope is that if somebody's in duress and they are thinking about harming themselves, that they see this information, they reach out to that hotline, they get the help they need, and then we don't see these types of incidents on our system. Next is injuries, and reportable injuries are classified as any injury that happens on our system or equipment where an individual has to be immediately transported from the scene for medical attention. So our established baseline was 3.47, and we have continuously seen a reduction with injuries on our system. Now, the next item is system reliability. Now, this is where we want to see it increase because this is the distance of train operations between failures. So our established baseline was 10,259, and we have seen an increase in the distance that our trains travel before they experience a failure. And that's really a testament to our light rail vehicle maintenance department and how well they maintain our vehicles. Also, we received new vehicles with the Mid-Coast opening, and we're currently decommissioning old vehicles as well. And then last is emergency brake applications. So the established baseline was 11.51, and we've seen a reduction until we got to 2020 to 2022, where we did have an increase in that 3-year average. And one of the contributing factors to that was the influx of new operators that we had on our system with the Mid-Coast opening. And so to mitigate the emergency brake increase that we saw, we implemented re-instruction training for defensive driving for train operators that had a higher average than their peers in emergency brake applications. And then we started to see a decrease in the numbers for emergency brake applications. Next is how we compare to our peers in California. In the calendar year of 2024, we had 39 accidents. And as you can see, we have San Francisco, LA Metro, VTA, and also SEC RTD as well in how we compare to the other agencies. Next, I just want to talk about how MTS hosted the TSI Safety and Security Audit course, which was attended by employees from peer agencies across the country, and then also MTS employees from the light rail vehicle maintenance, transportation, maintenance away, and track departments. So this course was a week-long course, and it taught our transit professionals how to plan, prepare, conduct an audit, and how to report on results and also maintain records. Now, safety specifically requested to host this course, and the reason why is because we are scheduled to have our triennial with the California Public Utilities Commission. And so that occurred back in August of 2024. We had a lot of employees that had never participated in a triennial audit. So we wanted to make sure that they knew what to expect and be well prepared. When the CPUC comes onto property to do their audit, they're inspecting MTS's design, construction, operation, maintenance, and administration to make sure that we are in compliance with our PTAS safety procedures. Unfortunately, I don't have the results from that audit. The CPUC hasn't scheduled our exit interview yet or given us a draft copy of the report. But Sharon Cooney will be a part of that exit interview, and then she will always still get a copy of that draft report, and she'll be able to report on that later on with the board. And then after we had our triennial in August, we had to still continue with our internal safety and security audit. And so the list that you see up on the screen are the 8 elements that we reviewed and conducted inspections as well internally. And I can report on that. There was no findings, no recommendations. So we did really well with our internal safety and security audit. And then lastly, I want to talk about our Train Operator Safety Award. MTS honored 119 train operators for their years of accident-free service. Among them was 4 train operators that were recognized for over 30 years of accident-free service. We do a nice little celebration where we have food for everybody and we get to, really recognize our operators. The picture that I have here is of Mr. Eddie Uribe. He's been a train operator since 1989, and he was recognized for 38 years of accident-free service. Mr. Uribe is a staple with the trolley. He has had a hand in developing operators that have come behind him. I like to point out one was Brian Riley when he was a train operator, and then also myself as well. So he doesn't show any signs of slowing down. So hopefully we'll have him for many, many more years to help with the development of our new operators. So that's all they have for you. And I'll pass it on to Jared Garcia.
Thank you, Fabian. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here today. For the bus performance measures, our prior goal was to improve upon a 3-year baseline. The bipartisan infrastructure law changed that to the 3-year calendar rolling average. These performance targets do not consider fault or preventability and are based on vehicle revenue miles. And in calendar year 2024, we traveled just over 24 million revenue miles. The first performance measure is fatalities. For all bus modes, we had 0 fatalities for calendar year 2024, which is an improvement over our 3-year average. The next performance measure is major events. This was previously referred to as a safety event and was updated with the FTA changing the national safety plan back in April of 2024. For this, we have seen the major events go up on the bus mode over our baseline and our 3-year average. However, 82% of the accidents in calendar year 2024 were ruled non-preventable. So essentially, anytime another vehicle runs a red light, runs a stop sign, rear ends the bus, regardless if we're at fault, it still shows up as a performance measure. In addition to the major events, we also measure injuries. So these injuries would be inclusive of all of the major events, as well as slips, trips, and falls where there is no vehicle collision. Those numbers are higher than our rolling 3-year average, which is heavily influenced by ridership and lower ridership during the pandemic. However, they are lower than the baseline number that was pre-pandemic. The next performance measure is system reliability. This is intended to measure the state of good repair. Our numbers are lower than the 3-year average. However, they are higher than the 3-year baseline. And this is mostly due to aging fleet and the implementation of the battery electric buses. And on the paratransit side, it is a higher rate than both the baseline and the 3-year rolling average. All of our accidents, whether they are a performance measure that's required to be reported to the National Transit Database, or any event that involves an injury or any property damage of $1 or more, are reviewed by our accident review committee. And this is also part of our key performance measure and part of board policy 42. We have seen coming out of the pandemic, our preventable accident rate rise some. And recently that's been mostly due to growing pains of employee turnover. And we have been hiring more employees over the last 1.5 years than we have previously. and newer employees tend to have a higher accident rate than tenured operators. We do have a program in place where we go out and we have a 30, 45, and 60-day check with all new bus operators, where we will go do a check with a supervisor. 45 days, we will have a trainer go out and ride with the operator and do a behind the wheel evaluation. And at 60 days, we bring back all of the operators and we do another training session based on those two observations. The last key metric that we track is preventable accidents for rapid routes. We had a historical low in fiscal year 2023, and in 2024, we had an increase. This is due to two primary reasons. One, we had in 2022 and 2023, not all routes had a preventable accident. And in 2024, each route had a preventable accident with the exception of two. One is the Route 215, which is the El Cajon Boulevard corridor. That had more than one preventable accident. And the other was the implementation of the South Bay Iris Rapid, which had 3 preventable accidents. When we first began with rapid service back in FY15, it was our goal to try and be less than half of regular fixed route service, and we are still meeting that goal. Each year that we've added a new route, we have seen a slight increase in the rate as we get accustomed to that new route and figure out where some of those pinch points are so that we can customize our training and make our operators more aware of what to look out for on that specific route. Each year, the CHP goes to each of our 5 bus terminals and does a complete inspection of the vehicles, as well as our licensing, hours of service, and drug and alcohol testing. And all 5 of our terminals successfully passed their CHP inspections. Wanted to also highlight our frontline employees and their accomplishments with safety. In 2024, we recognized 14 bus operators with the National Safety Council's Million Mile Award. We also recognized 275 bus operators for a year of safe driving, 125 maintenance employees with the safety award, and 22 frontline support services with an award as well. Now to the key point of today's meeting, which is the approval of updates to our written agency safety plan. As Fabian mentioned, the FTA added 7 new performance measures, which are now included in our written plan. It details changes to our employee safety committee, which we have to highlight the work schedules, pay, decision-making, and dispute resolution process of the employee safety committee. It also requires that the CEO notify you, the board of directors, if recommendations by the employee safety committee are not implemented. And lastly, the changes highlight the adoption of our transit worker assault risk reduction program. So the agency safety plan review and approval process, the FTA requires us to review this plan annually and update as required. It then goes to our employee safety committee for them to review, modify, and approve the changes. Following safety committee approval, it goes to the board of directors, which is where we are today. Following board approval, it'll be signed by the accountable executive, which is Sharon. And for the rail side, the rail portion of the plan goes to the CPUC for final approval. And with that, the staff recommendation is that the San Diego Metropolitan Transit System Board of Directors approve updates to the Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan.
Thank you. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not.
Okay, we will open board discussion on this item. This is an item that we will entertain a motion on. We will begin with Vice Chair Goebel.
Thank you, Chair. Excellent presentation. I'm just impressed that you have answered the questions that we probably would have thought of in advance, like when a number has reversed the trend, why? When the rapid thing is this, why? So you've done very well in anticipating questions, and it just really shows the excellence of your work in the program throughout the entire team, the bus operators, the trolley operators. It's really well done.
All right, let's go to Director Fleming.
Thanks for the great presentation. Regarding the rail, you mentioned the audit, that there, if I understood correctly, there were no recommendations out of the audit?
There were two audits. So there was the California Public Utilities Commission triennial audit that we had in August of 2024, and then the internal audit that we do annually. So for the annual one, there was no findings or recommendations, but for the CPUC audit, we haven't had our exit interview where they give us the recommendations and findings, and then also present us with the draft report with those recommendations and findings.
Okay. Yeah, I just, I guess in my experience with driving strong safety culture and performance within an organization, we could always find things that we could do better, always find things that we could improve on. So when I heard that regarding, I guess, the internal audit, it was concerning to me.
Well, what I would say is because we had our triennial first, it went through all the checklist items. So we had already prepared for the triennial. And so everything was already completed by the time we did our internal.
So the internal audit then took into consideration the triennial?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Thanks for clarifying that. And then for the, I guess, questions regarding the bus system. If I understood you correctly, regarding reliability, one of the factors that contributed to a lower rate of reliability was the electric buses. Could you clarify why?
I am not the best expert when it comes to vehicle maintenance, but I can tell you that they have different technology, and that whenever we implement new technology, we ran into kind of the same thing when we went to propane, and we transitioned our paratransit fleet to propane, and that there's some growing pains with that as well, learning that new technology and that transition.
So basically a learning curve to go through. So I would assume then that you would expect to see that improve over time?
We would hope.
Okay. And then I believe my last, I guess, comment / question is you mentioned turnover, new employees coming in, kind of an increased incident rate associated with that, which I understand is a real thing. I guess in my experience, I've also seen kind of a curve with that, where the newer employees, there's a higher incident rate. And then as employees, and this is in general, certainly not to identify any certainly sections of employees, but in general, as employees are more senior, sometimes become more complacent in the job. Do you see an increased rate with more senior employees too because of complacency? And if so, what is MTS doing regarding that?
Yes, so we do see that and we track that. So internally we track first 6 months, 6 months to a year, 1 to 4 years, 5 to 10 years, and 10 plus years. We do 8 hours of annual retraining for all bus operators every year. And that is completely customized every year. So we will look at any trends that we have, identify routes, hotspots, cover any new requirements that the FTA might have. And we do 8 hours of safety related training every year for all bus operators. And that's both in-house and our contractors as well. That is required by the state of California. It's called a VTT certificate. And so to operate a bus in public transit, you are required to have that certificate. And so that first hire, you have to have 20 hours of classroom training related to safety, and then 8 hours annually thereafter. And that's renewed every 5 years with the DMV.
Okay. Thank you both.
Thank you, Director Fleming. Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Stepp.
Thank you so much. Really appreciated this presentation. Fabian and Jared. And Fabian, I'm sorry for interrupting you. I was pointing to the mic, so I apologize for that. But it's a very, very comprehensive plan. I just had one question, and I was trying to find it on the documents here, but if I recall, in the public safety plan, there is mention of a public safety committee that is comprised of frontline employees and sometimes contractors. I wanted to know if any representatives from TransDev were a part of that committee.
So our contractors have their own safety committee as well. However, the FTA allows you to have one safety committee for bus and one safety committee for rail. And they require that it be an equal representation of frontline employees that are represented by labor organizations and management employees. For the in-house bus, that consists of IBEW and ATU. And for contract services, it is a mix of ATU and Teamsters.
Okay. I think that answered my question. And so some of those labor representatives are, so is there any representation from TransDev through that representation?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure it's clear. It sounded like yes, but want to make sure it's clear. Okay, thank you very much. I think you need a motion for this. I'll move the item.
All right. Thank you very much, Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Steppe. We have a motion on the floor and we'll go to Director Hall.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a second to the motion from Director Hall. Seeing no further discussion, clerk, please call the roll.
Members, please make your selections on the tablets. Looks like we're missing one more vote. The motion passes unanimously with 2 members absent.
All right, thank you, clerk. That brings us to item 24, the fiscal year 2026 capital improvement program. We are going to turn it over to Mike Thompson for the presentation. Feel free to get settled in and you could begin your presentation whenever you're ready.
Good morning, Mike Thompson. I'm the Deputy CFO, and I'm presenting the FY 2026 Capital Improvement Program, or CIP. I want to start with our funding levels for the proposed CIP, starting with our recurring revenue streams. We do receive federal revenues every year. All of our recurring revenue streams we do share between capital and operations. On the federal side, we get portions every year of 3 formula-based funds that goes through SANDAG, and currently they've estimated the numbers for next fiscal year as the apportionments haven't been published yet. The underlying legislation on the federal side is in place for next fiscal year, but it still has to go through Congress. So we have to wait for that to happen so we can see what the actual funding levels are going to be. But right now we're using the estimates from SANDAG on that side. We tend to try to put as much federal dollars in the operating budget for preventive maintenance, allowing that draw process and cash flow that we talked about earlier. But when we do increase the federal dollars in the operating budget, we do backfill capital with local funding, either Transportation Development Act or TDA or state transit assistance. So we try to keep capital whole and make sure capital is funded every year appropriately. This current year, we are going to do some extra funding shifts from our normal funding sharing methodology, and we're going to take $25 million from capital for operations in an effort to stretch out the structural deficit when actually we hit that fiscal cliff. And we're also going to do that for the next 2 fiscal years proposed right now. Transportation Development Act is a recurring sales tax fund that we receive through the state. State Transit Assistance is another recurring funding that we receive through the state on diesel fuel sales. And then finally, Low Carbon Transit Operations Program, or LCTOP, is another formula funding through the state that we receive every year, particularly for battery electric buses. On the non-recurring revenue side, these are things that are one-time in nature, things where we go after competitive grants and receive funding, or things just that just aren't going to recur year by year. So on here, we have all of our Transit Intercity Rail Capital Program, or TIRCP. That was a major capital award received for the Orange Line Improvement Project. We also have some Senate Bill 125 funding. We received TRC formula funding for that as well over the next couple of years. Some of that is in the operating budget, some of it is in the capital budget. And then other one-time funding is things like carryovers from closed projects and then carryovers from revenues from prior years or just other small discretionary awards that we have. So looking at the dollars associated with that, on the federal side, we're estimating 116 million in gross federal revenues for the next fiscal year. Again, that is just an estimate at this point. It still needs to be apportioned by Congress. That is similar with the current fiscal year's funding levels. We are moving some of that to the operating budget, leaving about $39 million net federal in CIP. For Transportation Development Act, normally we would program about 53 million based on our formula sharing methodology, but we are taking 25 of that for operations. There's going to be about 28 million of TDA in next year's CIP. State transit assistance, there's 22 million in the capital budget, and there'll be 11 million in the operating budget next fiscal year. And then STA, we also get a state of good repair piece that's only in the capital budget. It's about $6 million. You can see our low LCTOP funding, about $8.6 million. Our TRCP, which is a competitive award, with $42 million. And then about $18 million of other funding sources that are listed on the blue box on the right. So in total, we have about $160 million to spend next year, most of which is recurring. About 100 is recurring, and about 60 is non-recurring in nature. So to develop our project list every year, we do have some guiding principles that we follow. It's basically in Board Policy 65 around transit asset management. And that policy states that MTS is committed to effectively manage its transit assets and maintain a system in a state of good repair to support safe, efficient, reliable transit services across the organization. And you will use state of good repair repeatedly throughout this presentation because it is keeping our current system up to date. And it is basically where most of the money goes every year in our CIP. And you can see on the box on the right, the 20-year need for just upkeeping our existing system is $3 billion in total over those 20 years. So it's about 160 million per year that we need just to maintain our existing system. MTS is also required to comply with the vehicle maintenance regulations of the FTA and the Federal Railroad Administration, as well as the CPUC. And our policy also guides our prioritization process. And we base that prioritization process and other asset management decisions on the asset criticality, the condition, performance, available funding, safety considerations, and on the evaluation of alternatives that consider the full life cycle benefits, costs, and risks. That's all part of our board policy on transit asset management. Our process begins each September with a call for projects. Each department is responsible for updating their 20-year look for their CIP. It's a high-level look, very summary level. And then for the next 5 years, they submit individual projects over that period. That's a more detailed look of the needs over the next 5 fiscal years. And that's what we bring to the board is a 5-year look. And then once they have done that, they also prioritize their list of projects. And then the finance team actually consolidates that overall list and puts the overall consolidated project list together. And then a capital project review committee meets and discuss the overall project list and then has to break that down to what funding is available. So each committee does discuss their projects and their prioritization. Projects with safety and our operational needs are priority 1, and all priority 1 projects will be funded. And so then the overall list is prioritized the funding available. And then once the project list is finalized, there's also analysis based on social equity principles, and it showed there was no disproportionate impact on low-income or minority populations. So our 5-year unconstrained project need was $1.4 billion. Majority of that is state of good repair related. Over $800 million, over 60% of that need was state of good repair related. What we mean by state of good repair is bus revenue vehicles was 300 million, rail revenue vehicles 68 million, facility and construction projects 57 million, rail infrastructure 325 million, and other equipment is 66 million. That's what we need over the next 5 years for those state of good repair categories. Our other initiatives was another 537 million in this 5-year look. And most of that money is related to innovative clean transit and battery electric buses. It includes all the charging infrastructure at our 5 existing divisions. It includes funding for our new division, the Clean Transit Advancement Campus, or Division 6. And that other initiatives also includes some transit center type projects that are on the list of things we would like to do if funding was available. So that was the overall list. Of that 1.4 billion, about 240 million was requested for fiscal year 2026. With 163 million available, we were able to fund 68% of the dollars requested. So most of that funding, 93%, went to state of good repair. So most of the projects we are funding are related to state of good repair. There was 40 projects funded. The complete list of projects is in attachment B, and there's also short descriptions of the funded projects in attachment C that you can see. But dollar-wise, we have $54 million programmed next year for bus vehicle replacement. We have $6 million to facility and construction projects. We have about $85 million to rail infrastructure projects, and then about $7 million for other equipment, and then about $11 million for other initiatives, which includes some battery electric bus charging infrastructure. So again, total $163 million proposed funding for this next fiscal year. Giving you some highlights of what's in these categories. The bus revenue is pretty self-explanatory. We do have almost 800 buses in our fleet. You can see the breakdown of the types of buses. Majority of the buses are the 40-foot buses that you see most everywhere. We try to replace between 40 and 50 of those every single year. And they cost between about $800,000 for a regular 40-foot bus or $1.2 million for a battery electric 40-foot bus. And they last about 12 years. We have about 140 60-foot buses. Those we don't replace every year. We sort of replace them in bunches. So we sort of have to save up when those buses come due because they are more expensive. It's about $1.3 million for a regular natural gas 60-foot bus or $1.9 million for a battery electric 60-foot bus. We also have 24 commuter express buses, 40 minibuses, 107 paratransit minibuses, and then 14 ADA paratransit vans as well. So the next fiscal year, we are programming $54 million towards this type of project. We're purchasing 50 40-foot buses, and with the board approved utilization of sub credits, all these vehicles will be natural gas. And you can see on the chart on the bottom, we not only show what we're planning this year, but also what the need is over the 5 years. And you can see over the next 5 years, we expect to spend $316 million just on bus replacement. We also have our rail rental vehicle fleet, our light rail vehicles. We have 168 vehicles in that fleet. These have a 25-year useful life. The table on the right shows the series. We actually just replaced all our SD100s, which was the 2000 series. We're receiving the last of the new SD10s this current calendar year. We actually saved for that program for over 10 years to fund that SD10 replacement because it was 52 vehicles. So these are much larger, they're much higher cost. They're $4 million per vehicle. So when we have these things, we generally have to save up for them as we do these projects. And I actually detail that on the next slide. I have so 52 SD100s. We did fund it from 2015 through 2025. We initially expected to fund additional funding this current fiscal year, but since we're so close to the end of the project, we have a very good handle on what that budget is, and we're not going to need any additional funding. Additionally, we thought that full budget was $216 million, so it's going to stay at $211 million. But in this 5-year period, we are going to start funding the next round of replacements. Our SD7 series needs to be replaced in a few years. So we're going to start saving for that next fiscal year. And even in this 5-year window, we need to start saving for the SD8 replacements. So in total, over the 5 years, we need $68 million towards this type of state-of-the-art repair project. The next category is facility and construction projects. We have 6 major maintenance facilities around the county. We have 2 in Kearney Mesa. We have 1 in East County. We have 2 downtown right here between the trolley yard and the bus yard across the street. And we also have a South Bay bus facility. We also have passenger facilities along the rail line and at major transit centers as well. So each of those transit centers includes things as buses, shelters, and elevators especially. So all those things need ongoing maintenance to keep these in state of repair as well. For next fiscal year, 8 projects were submitted for funding. We were able to fund 4 of them, and 4 of them were not funded for next fiscal year. So $6 million in total funding was being allocated. It includes $2 million towards bus facility projects and about $4 million for passenger facility projects. And in that $4 million is additional funding for the Washington Street pedestrian enhancements. We've had some safety issues there, and you can see the picture on the slide where we lowered that wall and gave more visibility to passengers. We also have some other safety enhancements we're going to do with this next fiscal year. So in total, over the 5-year period, again, you can see $6 million funded for the current year, $6 million unfunded in the current year, and then the 5-year need is $57 million. The next category is rail infrastructure projects. The 60 miles of rail on our line is actually almost $5 billion in total assets to build that. So that does require upkeep on an ongoing basis. And every year you're going to see similar projects in our CIP related to the rail infrastructure. On the track side, this is anything directly related to the physical rail, and it includes the actual rail, and includes the ties underneath it, and includes any special track work where you have crossovers and things of that nature. And it also includes the grade crossings where the rail meets the road. And you can see the picture, what a completed grade crossing looks like on the bottom of the screen. The other type of rail infrastructure projects we call maintenance of wayside projects. That is any bridges or elevated track. It is also the drainage in the track right of way that the track sits on. And it also includes the electrification that drives the trolleys and also the signaling around that. Electrification, we always have projects there. All the rest of them, we just pop up from time to time, but we usually have a substation project in every single CIP. For fiscal year 2026, 18 projects were submitted. We were able to fund 16 and 2 were not able to be funded. This total here was $85 million. This does include $64 million towards Orange Line Improvement Project. It's a major rehabilitation of the Orange Line. Most of that funding is from a competitive grant award from TRCP, but there is a large number of our local funding that we're putting to that project as well. You can see we had about $68 million on track side, which again includes that Orange Line Improvement Project, and $17 million on the MOW side in the current year. 85 million funded, 4 million not funded in the current year, and then total 3-year need is 5-year need is $326 million. The last data good repair category is just other equipment. We had 15 projects submitted for 2026. This is basically 2 flavors. It's tougher maintenance, the bus and rail, just equipment replacements, and then also the IT side, where we have not only all our infrastructure, but our systems and our network as well. So again, of the 15 projects submitted, 14 were funded, 1 was not funded, about $3.7 million on the bus and rail side for their equipment replacements, and about $3.5 million on the IT side. The total 5-year need for this type of project is about $69 million. So this next slide rolls up all of our stated good repair needs over the next 5 years. You can see we're funding $152.6 million in the proposed CIP. We're not funding about $11 million due to funding constraints. And you can see over this 5-year period, it's $836 million in stated good repair needs. So that is an average of $167 million per year over those 5 years. And that it actually exceeds our recurring revenue streams forecast for the next 5 years after we shift some money from capital operations. So after stated good repair, we then begin looking at any other initiatives that we have. And the largest piece here is the innovative clean transit infrastructure. We're ongoing construction at all of our bus maintenance facilities to comply with these regulations. This funding stream, this funding group also includes that proposed Division 6 or Clean Transit Advancement Campus. As in the picture, you can see South Bay that's actually completed and in operation, the overhead gantry there. We are building similar overhead gantries at IED and KMD. Those are both funded currently. We need to add a little bit money to the IED project to fully fund that project in this current fiscal year. We are also building a backup charging infrastructure at South Bay to power that overhead gantry in the case of an emergency. So that's being funded this year as well. And then we're also being the design for East County, where we need to figure out how we're going to put overhead gantries at that site. So between South Bay being already complete, IED and KVD already construction, and East County in design, we aren't able to fund anything additional here. We need to, the next thing is going to be another phase of South Bay, because every facility, you see that one in the picture, every facility is going to get like 8 of those. You know, you do it once and then you go to another bus yard and then you come back and you do it again, and you get to keep building it out for all of our buses eventually. So like I said, we aren't able to fund anything extra there for South Bay Phase 2. Over the 5-year period, we need $446 million of this type of project, $240 million of which is the Clean Transit Advancement Campus, and the rest of it is just upgrading our existing facilities. Our last category is basically just other. We are funding $1 million here towards the Transit Amenity Improvement Project. We're building a board policy for that and a new plan around that. So we just wanted to park some CIP funding. So when that plan was done, we would be able to fund any projects that came out of that process. All of the rest of the projects are in the out years of the CIP, and there's not any funding available at this time for those projects. It's $90 million in total. And other than transit amenities, it's mostly around transit centers and transit and bus stops and things like that. Before we get to the 5-year look, we added this slide after the executive committee. There were a couple of questions out of the executive committee that we wanted to address for the full board. One of the questions was, what projects had dedicated funding that couldn't really be flexible? And it's basically 3 projects, basically 2 projects, 3 funding streams. The Orange Line Improvement, as mentioned, has $42 million of TRCP that was a direct award for that project. On the bus procurement side, of the $54 million being funded, $8 million of LCTOP and $3.9 million of the federal EPA Community Change Grant are directly awarded to the bus procurement project. The other question is just looking at a different breakdown of the project categories and what is passenger amenity related. And I pulled these from different other state of repair categories, but we're funding 4 passenger amenity projects for about $6 million. That does include the Pronto Mobile Enhancement and a transit amenity improvement and the Washington Street that we've talked about previously. And then unfunded, there was 2 projects at the Stadium Station that weren't able to be funded this current fiscal year. It's $5 million in total. So $5 million total unfunded passenger amenity projects. This next slide gives an overview of the 5-year look. We talked about the project totals, $1.4 billion in total projects requested in this 5-year period between state repair and other initiatives. We only have available funding stream of about $624 million. Now that includes our recurring revenue streams and any awards that we know about to date. So we do have a gap of $700 million on this 5-year CIP, but that is also what we aggressively go after for our other discretionary grants. And there's always opportunities at the federal level, or there had been opportunities at the federal level. There's opportunities at the state level that we aggressively go after to try to fill this bucket and get us back to 100%. But right now, over this 5-year period, we are showing only about 46% funded based on project needs and funding identified. And with that, it brings me to the staff recommendation that the Board of Directors approve the fiscal year 2026 capital improvement program with the estimated federal and non-federal funding levels, which were attachments A and B. As the federal funding appropriation figures are finalized and our other project funding sources become available, I'll let CEO to identify and adjust projects for these adjusted funding levels. Number 2 is recommend that the San Diego Association of Governments, or SANDAG, Board of Directors approve the submittal of our federal section 5307, 5337, and 5339 applications for the MTS 2026 CIP, and then recommend the San Diego Board of Directors also approve the amendment number 5 of the 2025 Regional Transportation Improvement Program, or RTIP, in accordance with this fiscal year 2026 CIP recommendations. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for the presentation. Let's see if we have any public comment.
We do not.
Okay, we will go to board discussion on this item, beginning with Director Fleming.
On slide 21, that a 5-year summary, you're showing a total presumably funded of 45.5%. How does that compare to previous 5-year cycles, and what's your level of confidence that we'll be able to fill the rest of that gap?
Part of normally this is in the 60% range, 55-60% range. It's a little bit lower because we took about $110 million out of CIP and moved it to the operations to address structural deficits on the operating side. So it's a little bit lower than we normally see, but it just makes the target, it just makes, we need more from other sources of funding.
Is there have you been working on any contingency plans as far as if we're not able to fully fund all of this?
The contingency plan is basically we just delay projects a little bit. Normally we fund buses and trolleys first, and then everything else we just try to fund what we can. The things like innovative clean transit, we try to get other funding sources that we've been able to get some TRCP funding for that type of stuff. So there's lots of different funding sources available. We just be aggressive as possible and try to fit the projects that we see coming up with the funding streams that are available.
If we end up with budget shortfalls, is there potential then that we switch gears on some of the purchases, say the electric vans versus non-electric buses, excuse me, to save cost and spread some of that out?
So that is certainly on the table for the board to discuss. That's always going to be a policy decision though. So when we always have to determine, we never have enough money for everything that we need to do and want to do. So for things that we always have to look for other streams of revenue. We discussed this at the last board meeting, but the ideas of what other types of revenue might we generate for ourselves. So it's a constant tension between availability of funding and the needs for capital and operations. So it's a balance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director Fleming. This is another item that will require a motion. I will be happy to make the motion. Director Fleming?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Seeing no further discussion, clerk, please call the roll.
Members, please make your selections on the tablets. The motion passes unanimously with 2 members absent.
Thank you, clerk. That brings us to item 25. That is the fiscal year 2025 operating budget mid-year amendment. And we're going to get this presentation from Gordon Meyer.
Good morning, Gordon Meyer, Manager of Financial Planning. So this morning I'm going to present the FY25 operating budget amendment. So we did provide a very detailed presentation to the executive committee last week. The full presentation with all the small, minute details are included as an appendix to this presentation that we're giving today. But today we are giving a very high-level summary to the board. And so some of the major themes that are represented in the mid-year amendment are we are expecting growth for both passenger levels and fare revenue, specifically related to our increase in average fare from the new fare enforcement. We're expecting an increase in other operating revenues, sales tax revenues. We are expecting a decrease this year and then also next year as well, based on the most recent SANDAG projections. We are reflecting the SB 125 funding in this year's amendment. So we'll get there as well. And then overall operating expenses are very close to the original budget. So first we'll look at the schedule of revenues. So first line, you can see passenger revenue. So we are projecting an increase of 925,000 or 1.2% here. Like I said, we're expecting passenger ridership to be higher than the original budget, as well as we're building an increase to the average fare based on the experience started in February with the new enforcement. Other operating revenue is increasing by 1.9 million. We're having a good year with advertising revenue. We're also increasing our budget for energy credit revenue as well as interest revenue. So overall operating revenues are projected at 115 million, which is an increase of about 2.8 million from the original budget. Next section here is subsidy revenue. So federal revenue, that's our recurring federal revenue, is increasing by almost 5 million. So we are increasing the amount of our federal recurring formula funds that's going to preventive maintenance. Preventive maintenance is one of the only operating expenses that are eligible to use the grants on. And so we are increasing that based on our projected eligible expenses. And Mike had touched on this in his presentation, but really the reason for that is maximizing our cash flow and then also being able to close out those federal grants faster. Stimulus funds, we're reflecting the final exact balance, 47.4 million. TDA, we are projecting a decrease of 2.6 million. That is due to slowing sales tax receipts for the region, and it's impacting not only TDA, but our Transnet as well. So next line, you can see our Transnet formula revenue is decreasing by 2.3 million. Both TDA and Transnet estimates are based on our most recent projections by Sandag. Next line, we have Transnet operating. So here, this is based on our projected expenses for our BRT and Midcoast services. So we receive a direct reimbursement that's not dependent on cash receipts for that. And based on those lowered expenses, we are reducing the Transnet operating share. State Transit Assistance, or STAs, decreasing by $5 million. So this is based on the most recent January governor's state budget estimate. And so the overall total, it does get shared with operating and capital. But the overall total is decreasing by 5 million, and we're putting all of that in the operating budget this year since the capital budget was already approved last year. Senate Bill 125 TIRCP. So last year, as the state tried to balance or was in the middle of balancing its budget, they delayed the first payment for the SB 125 funding that we were supposed to receive, and we were supposed to receive it in April. We didn't end up receiving it until September. So at the very last moment last year, we had taken all of the SB 125 funds out of our budget. For the mid-year amendment, we're adding it back in. And so we are including that 9 million based on our projected expenses for our SB 125 activities. And then other local is staying flat. So total subsidy revenue is projected at 308 million for FY25 now, which is an increase of 3.7 million or 1.2% from the original budget. Next line is our reserves. So we're now projecting to use 25.1 million from our reserves, which is a decrease of 6.5 million, which is good news. And that's really because we received the SB 125 funding. So we don't need to use as much from our reserves. So total revenues for FY25 are now projected at 448 million, which is a decrease of 35,000 from the original budget. Moving on to expenses, very high level. So personnel expenses are decreasing $50,000. Within that $50,000, there's a lot going on within there. We did negotiate new collective bargaining agreements with the SMART, IBEW, and ATU. We had put additional dollars in our original budget based on what we thought was going to happen. And so we did come in close overall. And this updated figure also does reflect some of the savings that we've seen on the security side, as well as the flagging side, where we've utilized less hours than we had originally planned. Purchase transportation. So this is our fixed route contracted service and our paratransit service that are both operated by Transdev. And so here we are projecting a slight increase of less than 0.5%. That's really representing the new Route 910, the overnight express that just started in January. Next, we have outside services. So we're expecting an increase of 1.5 million here, about 3%. Couple things going on here. We did have some projects that were budgeted last year where the the invoices didn't end up hitting until this year, so we had to move that budget to this year. We've also seen an increase in our CCTV maintenance and replacement costs, so we're reflecting budget for those as well. Materials and supplies, typically our variances when we report this is due to usually a bad experience with either bus or trolley revenue vehicle parts. But this year we're taking funding that was in the original budget for the ticket vending machine credit card module upgrade, and we're moving that to next year based on when we think we can actually get that project done. The actual revenue vehicle parts are actually trending close to budget. Energy, this has been good news all year, and it's good news here as well. So we are reducing the energy budget by 1.7 million or 3.3%. This is all on the compressed natural gas as well as electricity side. We've had favorable commodity rates all year. We've really seen those come down and normalize more closer to what we saw pre-COVID. And so overall, we're projecting that 1.7 million decrease, most of which is on the CNG side. Electricity is only increasing 100,000 from the original budget, but that's with all the additional trolley service that we just added in January as well. Risk management, we're decreasing the budget by 700,000 or 6.2%. This is primarily in claims. Each year we have during our budget meeting, we take a look at our schedule of court cases and what is coming down the pipeline, and we are reducing the budget for not only the claims but the associated legal expenses based on the first half experience and what's happening in the second half of the year. And then lastly, we have a line for other that includes general and administrative cost as well as our non-revenue vehicle leasing costs. So the leasing costs are increasing pretty significantly due to an increase in our fleet size. We also have a new contract with Enterprise that had some increases as well. So overall expenses are fairly close to the original budget, movement within the categories, but overall a $35,000 reduction from the original budget. So on this slide, we can see our revenues and expenses combined. So our total recurring revenues are decreasing by 2.9 million from the original budget. That's mostly the sales tax slowing that we're seeing that's going to impact this year and probably the next few years as well. Expenses are decreasing 35,000. And then so our structural deficit, which is our recurring revenues less our expenses, is now in the amended budget projected at 81.5 million. So that's an increase in our structural deficit of 2.9 million from the original budget. And that's really because of the decrease in the recurring revenues from our slowing sales tax. In order to get to our overall balanced budget, we need to add back in the one-time funding. So you can see the first line there's reserves. Already mentioned this, but we're using 25.1 million in the amended budget versus the 31.6 in the original budget. Last year of federal stimulus funding, we'll draw that, or we've already drawn that final 47 million. Even though we've already drawn that funding, some of it is still available in our operating deficit reserve, but we did just receive our last payment of stimulus funds. And then we are including the 9 million for SB 125 funding as well. So with those, we do have a balanced budget for FY25 in the amendment. And then the final 25 amendment was actually very close to what we had forecasted in the 5-year forecast a month or two ago. And so no change at this time of when we think we'll hit the fiscal cliff. With the shifts from capital that were approved at the last board meeting, we're still looking at running out of funding in early fiscal year 2029. And this is just an overview of what's coming down the pipeline. So we have our meeting today. We'll come back to the executive committee on April 10th with a first look at the FY26 operating budget. And then we'll take that same presentation to the board on May 8th or on April 17th. And then we'll come back to the executive committee on May 8th with a draft of our final proposed FY26 budget. And then ultimately we'll bring that to the board on May 15th and have our public hearing and request formal adoption of our FY26 budget. And with that, that brings me to the staff recommendation that the San Diego Metropolitan Transit System Board of Directors enact resolution number 25-1, amending the FY25 operating budget for MTS, San Diego Transit Corporation, San Diego Trolley, MTS Contract Services, and the Coronado Ferry. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not.
Okay, we will open board discussion on this item. We have a staff recommendation. I will be happy to move the staff recommendation, and we have a second from Director Hall. Seeing no further discussion, clerk, please call the roll.
Members, please make your selections on the tablets. The motion passes unanimously with 12 members voting yes and 3 members absent.
Thank you, clerk. That takes us to item 26, which is an informational item on the Transit Operations Insourcing Feasibility Study, Existing Conditions Report. Here with us is Mike Daney, along with James Gherkin and Russ Chisholm with the consulting firm Transportation Management and Design. Please feel free to begin your presentation when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Chair, members of the board. I'm Mike Wygant. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here for Transit Services at San Diego MTS. You may remember back in 2023, the board had directed staff to take a look at our contracted operations for fixed route and paratransit and study the feasibility of potentially bringing that in-house. As a reminder, all of our paratransit services currently contracted to Transdev, and about half of our fixed route is also contracted to Transdev. Staff completed an RFP in 2024 to put that in front of the board, and in July of 2024, the board of directors authorized a contract to TMD to complete that study. The study is approximately an 18-month study to look at what steps would be necessary, the options, the impacts, the positives, the hurdles and challenges that we would have to get through to potentially bring all or some of our currently contracted operations in-house. So I'm joined to my right by Mike Daney. He's our Director of Contracted Operations and Facilities. He's the in-house project manager over this. And by James Gherkin and Russ Chisholm from TMD. They're the project leads for this study, and I'll turn it over to them. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Wygant. As he indicated, I am James Gherkin with TMD, the contractor leading the study. We're going to give you just a quick update on the project, the work we've done with the existing conditions report, and where we go from here. As Mike indicated, Mike Daney, Director of Contract Operations and Passenger Facilities, is the project manager on the MTS side. Transportation Management Design, a transit planning firm based up in Carlsbad, is leading the project on the contractor side, and we're supported by 2 subcontractors, BBK, a Southern California law firm with experience with public sector unions and transit agencies, as well as 49's Technology, a Bay Area-based transit planning firm with specialty in transit technology. As was previously said, this is an 18-month study to understand feasibility of insourcing contract transit operations and impacts both internally in MTS and its employees, as well as the riders and community at large. The project is structured in 4 phases or tasks for us. We've recently completed the first, which is the existing conditions analysis, moving forward with an operational administrative concept plan, understanding some of the specifics of what it would take under the various scenarios we're looking at. And then later this year, we'll be developing an implementation strategy and schedule, as well as detailed costing and impact assessment. Timeline shown here, continuing through the remainder of this year and concluding the project in the beginning of 26. This study is considering 4 scenarios. 1, which would be insourcing of all currently contracted operations. A second scenario looking at only fixed route and the minibus service out of Copley. A third scenario of insourcing only paratransit, as well as a fourth, do nothing alternative, maintaining current service contracted. So we recently completed the existing conditions, or first task of the project. This began in fall of 24 with a report submitted to MTS in a draft form in the beginning of this year. This included a deep dive review of MTS and the Transdev organizations both, as well as the processes and performances of each, and lays the groundwork for the scenario development for insourcing. This included extensive document review, contracts, the collective bargaining agreements with the labor organizations, as well as internal MTS reports and documents, data analysis, looking at financial service performance data, as well as interviews with MTS and TransDev employees, as well as conversations with each of the 4 locals from the 3 unions representing the MTS and TransDev workforces. This time I'd like to hand it to my colleague Russ, who will walk us through some of our findings from the report.
Good morning. Probably the most important finding was that for your customers, they see one MTS on the street. They don't see 2 operators, they see one MTS. Second, as James indicated, any discussions involve 3 unions, 4 locals, and 9 collective bargaining agreements. As James indicated, we met with each of the unions and locals to hear their perspective on the insourcing. Third, the wage ranges at TransDev are lower than MTS for comparable positions. Fourth, maintenance, recruitment, and training at TransDev differs significantly from MTS. In particular, TransDev hires people with experience in heavy vehicle maintenance. They bring them across and they become bus maintainers. They tend to stay at that position that they were hired in at. MTS has a career approach where people generally come in as service workers. They move into the 3 or 4 year apprentice program and they come in as level A mechanics and they move up the ranks. In fact, most of your maintenance managers have come through your own program, so it's very career oriented. The fixed route operating costs are much lower at TransDev than MTS. This is a very kind of surface look at this point. This is based on the original 2025 budget book. We obviously will be updating this based on what we heard in the discussion right before this. But if you look at this, the cost per revenue mile for in-house MTS bus is about $13.50 per revenue mile, just under $9 for TransDev fixed route and minibus. And then TransDev paratransit is less at $5.63. In terms of the revenue hours, you see a similar progression. The difference here between the relative revenue mile and revenue hour is the nature of how fast each of the services they're assigned to operate. TransDev's regional and national corporate structure make comparing administrative costs and staffing challenging because corporate does some of the activities that would normally be assigned to a person. That way, they're able to bring some economies of scale to the table. This is something we'll be looking at more closely in task 4. And lastly, there's no in-house paratransit or minibus operation to be able to compare exactly.
Thank you, Russ. Excuse me. Thank you, Russ. Last part of the presentation will just be a recap quickly of the plan board updates for you, as well as next steps in the project. So MTS staff and the consultant team will continue to seek board input and provide regular updates on the project as it progresses, and we develop further findings and recommendations or establishment of the scenarios. You may recall we met with you back in September to provide an overview and introduction of the project. We then are here today with the existing conditions findings. Our next touch point is scheduled for May, where we'll brief you on the operational insourcing concept plan. And we intend to come back in September to provide updates on the strategy and costs, and then a final briefing on the plan in January of next year. Where do we go from here? The project team is going to develop the operational administrative concept plan, which will identify advantages, challenges, hurdles across the organization for each of the 4 scenarios, with detailed and final cost projections to be developed in that later task. And as I mentioned in the last slide, next board update is planned for May of 2025. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not.
Okay, we will open board discussion on this item. This is an informational item, so no motion is necessary. If there is no board discussion, we do have board discussion from Director Elo Rivera.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make sure that I understand this is an ongoing conversation. We're going to hear more. So I appreciate the work on this. I do think this is a really important thing for us to research and then have, really thoughtful consideration of as a board. And I'm looking forward to the next phase in that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Elo Rivera. Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Stout.
Just additional clarification. In May, will we have the feasibility study completed or another update?
Just another update. The full study won't be completed until January 2026.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the updates too. That way we don't have to take in all of the information at one time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Pro Tem. All right, seeing no further board discussion, thank you very much for the update. We'll look forward to future ones. Item 27 is another informational item. It is the fiscal year 2025 mid-year performance monitoring report. Brent Boyd and Matthew Grace are with us to provide the presentation. Please feel free to get settled in, and you're welcome to begin the presentation whenever you're ready.
And scheduling. I'm here with Matt Grace, who is a transit data analyst for us. And we're here to present the FY 25 Q1 and Q2 performance monitoring report. So it's based off Board Policy 42, which is an established board policy to establish a process for evaluating and adjusting our existing transit services and also for implementing service changes. It's an adopted vision for a customer-focused, competitive, integrated, and sustainable system, again, adopted by the board. We categorize services by types, a number of different types for buses. We have Premium Express, which is now Rapid Express, Express, Rapid, Urban Frequent, which are 15-minute services or better, Urban Standard, Circulator, and Rural, and also Light Rail, which is trolley and demand response. We establish performance indicators for each of these and performance targets for our performance indicators, which I'll get into in the next slide. The board receives annual reports and quarterly updates. The annual report is a much more detailed analysis. The quarterly update, where we're here now, is a much more high-level overview. And we will start doing quarterly updates. In the past, since COVID, we've really been coming twice a year, so every 6 months, but we will start coming quarterly. Our Policy 42 evaluation criteria, the performance indicators, you see they're grouped in a number of different categories: customer-focused, productivity and quality. So your total passengers, average weekday passengers, passengers per revenue hour, and passengers per in-service hour. That's really a difference in accounting for layover or not. That's the difference between revenue hour and in-service hour. Then quality, we have load factor. How crowded are the buses and the trolleys? On-time performance, accident rates, comments that we're getting from passengers, and also mean distance between failures, so our reliability. And how connected are the services? Our route headways, span of service consistencies, and service availability. How much of the area is served by transit? And finally, what does it take to operate the service? In-service miles, hours, how many vehicles does it take? And then how efficient are they? Are we operating the services and how are they being used? There's in-service speed, total miles, in-service miles over total hour, or in-service hours over total hours, and then fare box recovery rate and subsidy per passenger, which are both metrics accounting for how well the system is used and how efficient we are in the operations. So quick few stats: average weekday ridership. What you're looking at here is a graph showing the average ridership. Red is trolley, blue is bus, and black is the total system, total fixed route. And you'll see that we were trending up before COVID. Then you see the green line for COVID, and then we had a precipitous drop, about 70% drop immediately after COVID. But we've been going up every year since then. And again, these are the numbers just from Q1 and Q2, so July through December, basically. Since 2024, or the 1 year change, our system is up 7%. And we've been going up year after year. Trolley is up about 6%, bus is up about 8%. If we look at pre-COVID, overall, the system is down about 10%, but we are gaining every year. Trolley is up 7%, so we have more trolley riders than we did before COVID. And bus is down 23%. Now, these numbers are a little bit off because we opened Midcoast, the Blue Line extension, right after, basically during COVID. So what happens is we added a bunch of trolley riders due to Midcoast, and then we consolidated a number of bus routes in that area. So inherently, we're going to lose some bus riders and gain some trolley riders in that concept. But bus has been gaining at a higher rate lately. I have a note there that the commuter bus is the slowest to return. That's our premium rapid bus service that comes down from Escondido and Rancho Bernardo and Sabre Springs into downtown. We're still down about 62% from pre-COVID. There's a lot of downtown employment that has gone away, and we're no exception. I mean, that's happening all across the country. But I will note that since January, that ridership has gone up about 25% due to a lot of return to work mandates and such. So that trend is coming back. If we look at just the year after COVID, so when we had that precipitous decline, we actually doubled ridership since then on bus and trolley and system-wide, more than doubled. This graph simply shows the average monthly weekday ridership by month. So you see that we're continually improving. We identified the baseline ridership pre-COVID at about 282,000 per weekday. And we actually came very close to hitting that mark in October of last year. And October is traditionally our highest ridership month. We got very close to hitting that mark. We went down a little bit in November and December, which happens every year. But we expect to reach pre-COVID levels very, very soon, either sometime in the next year or two or so. In terms of total ridership, it's a very similar chart to average weekday ridership as looking at overall ridership. And again, you see the trends that we dropped right after COVID, and then we've had significant increases since then. So again, trolley recovered at a quicker rate than bus, but bus has been recovering at a quicker rate in the last year or so. So that's a really good sign. Demand response, which is our access services, they're down 32% from pre-COVID, but they're up 13% from last year. So we're seeing similar trends across all modes. This is the ridership by month for this fiscal year. You see again, October is our highest ridership month, and it's not unusual. That happens almost every year. And then you see the trend. The red line was the last year pre-COVID. So you see the bar chart, which is the current year. We're getting very close to that trend of the pre-COVID ridership. The table you see below is our month-over-month ridership change year over year. And you'll see that earlier in this quarter, July, August, September, October, we had significant increases over last year at the same time. Slowed down a little bit in November and December. November and December are always a little bit strange for ridership just due to all the holidays and such. But January, which is part of Q3, so it's not part of this analysis, we've actually seen an 8% increase over last January. So I think the trends are going to be similar to what we saw earlier in the year through the rest of this fiscal year. One thing we wanted to highlight is we talk about how our ridership still hasn't recovered from pre-COVID, even though we're very close to it. We're still down about 7%, but compared to the nation, we are doing incredibly well. National transit ridership is down about 23% in the same time frame. And the chart that you're looking at here is the top 25 transit systems by total ridership in 2019 before COVID, and how we're doing in terms of ridership retention among those top 25 agencies. So in this case, the shorter the bar is better. So that's the least ridership that we've lost. So one transit agency has a higher retention rate than us, and that's New York Bus and MTA Bus in New York. They're down about 6.8%, so just a little bit less than what we're down. And we are much better than many other of our peer systems. I see LA Metro is number 3, and they're 14% down. So the rates that we have are pretty incredible when you look across the country. Another way to look at it is what our total ridership was before COVID. We ranked number 21 in the country in terms of total ridership. You see that table on the left. Now the table on the right is FY25, and we're number 13. So that's an amazing jump in just a few years.
And those are 6-month numbers.
6-month numbers, yeah, for July through December. And what you'll notice is we're number 13 currently. Four of the agencies above us are New York. So New York City Transit, New Jersey Transit, MTA New York Bus, and MTA Long Island Railroad. And the other ones that are above us are usually substantially bigger metropolitan areas than San Diego is. So LA Metro, CTA is Chicago, WMATA is Washington, DC, MBTA is Boston, SEPTA is Philadelphia, and so on, San Francisco Muni. So many of the agencies, or all the agencies above us, are bigger metropolitan areas than San Diego is. You'll see some of the agencies below us are in much larger metropolitan areas than San Diego, such as Houston, Dallas, MARTA in Atlanta, much larger metropolitan areas than San Diego, but we have higher ridership than the major transit agencies in those regions. So I think that's showing good trends for MTS. Some other metrics that we track: passengers per revenue hour. The idea is that we want to improve this number. This is how well the service is being used for the service that we provide. The idea is that we want to improve the numbers for each category of transit year to year. And for the most part, we're doing this. The declines that you see on Rapid and Express, that's really just a matter of categorization of routes. We replaced the 950 Express route with the 227 Rapid. That's the 950 was the Express route from Otay Mesa to Iris, and the 227 is the Iris Rapid that basically does the same thing, but extends the service into Imperial Beach. So it kind of changed the category of that route and also changed some of the metrics. So when we come back a year from now, those numbers will be much more relevant than they are now. And then finally, on-time performance, our goal is for some of the categories, 90%. So that'd be the trolley, express, that type of thing. And then 85% for the other services. And that is one thing that has been falling a little bit. That's due to increased ridership, which causes longer dwell times and such, and more traffic out on the roads that we're seeing. But that's something that we will continue to observe as we go forward. So that concludes the presentation. Really just wanted to do a quick synopsis of what we look at. And I will mention that there's a lot more detail available in the agenda packets. We have route by route level detail, category detail, and all that kind of stuff. So there's a ton of information in there. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do. Marco Espinosa, please unmute yourself now.
Hello, good morning. Thank you much for the time. I have noticed with the Pronto app, there just seems to be a small little discrepancy between us and North County. It seems as if they have an option to opt out of paying for the MTS service, but yet we don't have an option to opt out from paying for the North County service. They only have a Sprinter and Breeze pass, whereas we don't have one that excludes that. And the only connection between MTS and North County is the 101 from UTC, and then the Rapid and Rapid Express that goes to Escondido and up to 15 to then connect to the Sprinter. There's no rail to rail between MTS and North County, so I did think that was a little odd. Yet North County can utilize their rail to rail with Amtrak Surfliner. So they only need to purchase the Coastal Region Zone 1, which is from Oceanside to Solana Beach, but then they can still access downtown via that, sort of 5 freeway route, that rail, but yet in the South, we don't have that same option to go north. It just did seem a bit odd to me. And also, I wanted to propose, I know most people will have the pass on their phone, on the Pronto app, but for the physical card, if we could make a keychain tag, those little kind of like small ones, that would be really helpful. Thank you very much.
That concludes public comment, Chair.
Thank you, Clerk. We will now open board discussion on this item, beginning with Vice Chair Goebel.
Thank you, Chair. Great presentation. I love the comparisons with the other agencies because that's really a great a number. I think it was slide 8 or slide 9 where you compared them, the one where we're ranked 13th, that one. Another metric that would be interesting to me would be we might rank higher would be per revenue mile, because I would expect New York Transit to have a whole lot more revenue miles than we have. But when you compare the two, we actually may have a higher rate. So there are some more metrics I think that could give us insight into this. We're really good at publicizing, using the system during what we know will be big events, opening day at the Padre game, Comic-Con, concerts, things downtown. I would ask the staff to consider rain days. Director Hall and I took the trolley down today because we knew it'd be faster than driving on the freeway. It would be safer. And so when you know there's a weather forecast of heavy rain coming, the 2 days a year we have it, there's probably more. But 1/10 of an inch can wreak havoc on our freeways. We know that. That you would consider publicizing that as an event. It would be interesting to know what ridership has done this week with the rain. If it's gone up a little bit, maybe there's an opportunity to use our system even more when you know there's potentially adverse traffic during your normal commute. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Goebel. Let's go to Director Fleming.
Just a question regarding your slide 11 regarding the on-time performance. You indicated that the on-time performance has suffered slightly, largely because of increased ridership and then the traffic congestion. Is that something that, is that something that you factor in as time goes on and adjust schedules accordingly?
We're constantly looking at schedules. We have a scheduling department that is constantly looking at running times and all that stuff. So that is something that we constantly consider. We'll be doing a comprehensive operational analysis starting out in the next couple months, where we'll be looking at that in even more detail. But we are constantly evaluating all of the routes, and where we indicate, this is just kind of surface level data. We get much more detailed data by route and time point and all that kind of stuff. And so we're constantly evaluating that and looking for opportunities for improvement. So this will be one of the focuses that we have going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director Fleming. Seeing no further board comment, this was an informational item, so no motion is necessary.
Yeah, I just wanted to draw attention to attachment A to this agenda item. It really has a lot of route by route detail. And I think it's a great time for us to be bringing this report to you, because this is the type of detail that we look at when we're going to be looking at route selections for changes in the COA. And so that would be, those are the kinds of metrics that Matt and Brent and his whole team will be working on as we move forward this next year.
Good, thank you. A few closing things here. Item 28 is for board member or CEO communications, if there are any.
I have a couple, Chair.
Yes,
there's
go ahead.
some board members who.
Our CEO, go ahead.
Okay. So I wanted to alert you all to the fact that we are going to be participating in the International Bus Rodeo in Austin, Texas. We have selected our #1 bus operator and our team of 3 mechanics who will be competing for national, international honors. And that will be April 5th through the 8th. We're very excited about that. I also wanted to let you know I was in Sacramento this week for the Transit Transformation Task Force. This was our 9th meeting. And I will be continuing to attend those meetings. Our hope is that by the fall, we will have a draft report. And I will, if it's significant, I will try to give you a little bit of an update on what is in that report. We are getting some traction with the messages that we need to do some things with regard to TDA reform. We need to look at what is going to make transit sustainable here in the state of California. So we're hopeful that that report will reflect all of those great conversations. A side note to that is that we are gaining very good traction within the media, as well as to gaining advocacy groups who are now looking to this as kind of a call to arms. And so we're hopeful that we will be able to build on that as the summer progresses. And then finally, tomorrow I will be attending the Sandag board meeting. There's an item on the downtown stopover project, which is where we will eventually, MTS will have a stopover that is off street, and it will allow us to pull our buses in there and provide break rooms, et cetera, for our drivers. So I just wanted to let you know that I will be there. And if anybody would like a little bit of a briefing prior to that, if you are attending the board, I'd be happy to give you that.
Very good. Thank you, CEO Cooney, and thank you for being there at Sandag tomorrow too. Address that item. All right, a few other notes here. The board's next meeting date is on April 17th at 9 o'clock in the morning. The members of our new ad hoc Sustainable Transit Committee are going to be meeting in the conference room next door after this. We're going to be talking about the community engagement plan. We'll be talking about the comprehensive operational analysis. If there are other board members who wish to stick around to hear that discussion, you are welcome to do so. And lastly, we have an adjournment in memory this morning. We'd like to adjourn this meeting in memory of one of San Diego's greatest and longest serving civic leaders, Mr. Leon Williams. Mr. Williams made many significant contributions to our region during more than 5 decades of local leadership. He was first elected to office in 1969, becoming San Diego's first Black council member. Years later, he became the first Black supervisor elected to the San Diego County Board of Supervisors. While the public may have known him best for those roles, many will recall that Mr. Williams served the community in numerous other ways as well. Among them, his legacy includes distinguished dedication to our public transit system. Mr. Williams first joined the Metropolitan Transit Development Board, or MTDB, at its inception back in 1976. He went on to serve on the board for 30 years, and he served as board chair from 1994 to 2006 when he retired. In fact, upon his retirement, the board gave Mr. Williams the title of MTS Chair Emeritus. One of his many accomplishments as MTS board chair was leading the agency to connect transit to educational opportunities. He was instrumental in bringing trolley service to the center of the San Diego State University campus. That award-winning trolley station opened in July of 2005, and it now serves thousands of students and faculty and staff and visitors every day. The 5.6-mile Green Line trolley extension, which included SDSU, closed the gap in Mission Valley and created the light rail connection between Old Town and Santee. MTS dedicated the San Diego State University trolley station to Mr. Williams in June of 2011 to commemorate his many contributions to our transit system. Mr. Williams inspired and paved the way for many San Diegans, and we are thankful for his many years of service to this transit agency, to our region, and to the many, many people he helped along the way. We close our meeting today in his memory, and we are adjourned.